All right, good morning. I'll get started. This is our Public Safety Committee meeting of January 16th, 2024. I call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Councilmember Corr. Present. Councilmember McKee Rodriguez. Councilmember Alderete Gavito.
Present.
Chair Cabello Haverda.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. The first item is approval of minutes of November 27, 2023. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Did we have any public comment, Madam Clerk?
We have no members of the public signed up to speak.
Thank you. So I'm excited today for our items. We have a briefing on our 2023 crime data and for the full year, I believe. And then, of course, a report on a technology situation with the police that I'm excited to hear about as well. I just have to take a quick moment to notice, as we talked about, there are only women at the table, kind of amazing. So it's going to be a very efficient meeting today. A lot of information. We're excited. So for the past year, this is our first committee of the year, our first public safety committee of the year. This committee has been monitoring the progress of violent crime prevention plan that was put in place at the beginning of 2023. And if I misspeak anything, Chief, please, of course, correct me when you come up. The good news is it looks like most of the statistics are down, but a lot of information that we'll hear here today. So I invite you to the podium, Chief. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. So we're going to look at FBI reporting requirements, and these requirements are, I think that a lot of people are under the impression that we are mandated by law or some other regulation to report our NIBRS numbers, or any cities is mandated to report their NIBRS numbers, but in fact they're not, but it is tied to funding. If you don't report your numbers, you are probably not going to get any government, get any government money when it comes to applying for grants. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the crime statistics for 2023, and then look a little bit at our strategies for reduced violent crime and property crime. So the FBI expects everyone to report their crime stats through the year. And just as an aside, these numbers that we're reporting today are not officially sanctioned yet by the FBI. That won't be done for another few months. But these are the numbers that we report to them, with the understanding that they are accurate and are our official numbers. So we used to report our crime under the UCR requirements, which is completely different than what we're looking at here. That was the UCR numbers were reported under a hierarchy basis. So the highest crime committed in a series of events was the one that got reported. So if it was a homicide related to a burglary, related to a robbery, or a robbery or a theft, only the homicide would get reported. That's not so with NIBRS. With NIBRS, every crime, I think it's up to 10, related to a single criminal event is reported, and it's considered to be more accurate than what it was under NIBRS. There are 24 categories with over 50 offense types, and what that means is under each category, let's say it's a theft. Well, it could be a pickpocket, it could be a theft from a store, it could be, so those are the different offense types that they're talking about here, or that we're talking about here. And then we have Group B. Group A is are all reported whether there's an arrest or not. Group B offenses are reported only if there's an arrest. And then the NIBRS categories, Group A, you've got 3 categories: crimes against persons, society, and property. Crimes against society is new, and they are crimes that pretty much don't have a victim associated with them. And then looking at our calls, our emergency and non-emergency calls, we had over close to 2.5 million calls in 2023, 1.4 million emergency, and just over 1 million non-emergency calls. So in our crimes against person, violent crime, we were down almost 10%. Crimes against society, there's victimless crimes, down 2%. And then property crimes, we're still looking at an increase as we did last year. Our 9% decrease, we pretty much had a decrease in every offense category except for kidnapping and abduction. Our assault down 9.5%, homicides 26%. Sex offenses, non-forcible, all of those offenses are down for a total of 9.6, a 9.6% decrease. And here's interesting, and I'll talk about the first three motives here, first three factors here, argument related. So most of our homicides were due to an argument, two people arguing with each other, and they resulted in someone getting shot or stabbed to death. And then secondly, human trafficking, we see back in 2022, we had the event down at Quintana Road, which gave us 54 homicides that year. This year we had none related to human trafficking. And then family violence, intimate partner related homicides was the third highest category. And that, of course, family violence has always been an issue here in San Antonio, and it continues to be so. Crimes against society, down in most categories. We have a fraction of a percentage increase in drugs and narcotics with an overall reduction 2.2%. Crimes against property, and this again has been an issue for us, and I think much of it was related to that TikTok video that came out earlier in the year. Our motor vehicle thefts way up, and here's the thing about motor vehicle thefts. Many of those vehicles that are stolen, they're not stolen for just joyrides. Matter of fact, most of them are not. They're stolen to commit other crimes. So oftentimes we'll get a tag number on an offense that's committed, and we find out after we run that tag number, hoping to get an ID of the owner, we find out that vehicle was stolen. So we have a 6% increase, almost 7% increase in motor vehicle theft. And again, due to the TikTok video, I think that's what helped our increase along. And then looking at our the ethnic breakdown of our property crimes last year, you see the breakdown there: white, Hispanic, Latino, unknown, and African American, Asian, Pacific Islander, and Native America, for a total of 100%. Crimes against property. Here we're talking about vehicle theft again. Looking at the number of stolen vehicles, the most popular vehicles stolen. Again, Kia, and again, I say that due to the TikTok video. And then we've got Hyundai, and then our pickup trucks, with the Ford F-Series being the most popular. Every community meeting that we make, it's usually there's usually a discussion on property crimes, and we talk about that at every meeting with our SAFE officers. This year, we had, as we do every year, we had a holiday crime task force, holiday crime reduction task force. It's a group that stays on the street and actively goes after people who are breaking into cars, or have warrants for a variety of theft-related offenses from November, and that's toward the end of November, to January 5, we had 178 arrests, 208 stolen vehicle recoveries, and here you go, 51 stolen weapon recoveries. Our regular property crimes task force is doing a great job. Reported cases, 5,800. Cases that we filed for arrest, almost closing in on 2,000. Arrest warrants, just over 600, and then we recovered over $1 million in property as a result of the work of that task force. And then our focus on violent crime, you all are familiar with this. We established a partnership with UTSA. The second phase of that was a hotspot policing strategy. Our mid-year result of that hotspot policing strategy in the treatment areas was a 42% reduction. And then the second phase, which will be coming up this year, problem-oriented place-based policing. Our goals when it comes to reducing violent crime, I think the biggest challenge in that and the most impact that we could have is if we had more people, more witnesses reporting what they know to police, and we would be able to close a lot more cases a lot more quickly than we do right now. But the challenge is, again, is to getting witnesses to talk to police. And I think that's that number 3 dot point, increasing community trust and engagement with SAPD. That is, in my opinion, what we're talking about when we talk about increasing trust and engagement, getting people to talk to police who are witnesses. And they're afraid to do that for a variety of reasons, and understandably so. And then we want to improve the place-based conditions that contribute to violence. So talking about our problem-oriented place-based policing, it is as mentioned on the screen, it is a multi-dimensional strategy. And I guess if I were to summarize all those dot points on that screen, I would say that every city department that can impact a quality of life issue in a neighborhood, which is a reason why those neighborhoods were identified, will be involved in this strategy. And then lastly, our violent crime prevention plan is we'll be working with Metro Health, and they will focus on a variety of areas, as you see on the screen. And then lastly, that plan will be presented to City Council at B session later on this month. And that, council members, is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I mentioned earlier that, the good news is that at least the violent crime statistics are down. But, we can't spike the ball. We've got to stay focused and make sure that we're continuing to work on violent crime and, of course, get property crime numbers down. I recall you came to a neighborhood in my district and were talking to them about they were complaining to you about some of the things happening in the neighborhood, and you told them, well, you need to call us because they weren't calling you. So I think that's a big part of it, is making sure that our community is old school, right? Watching out for each other, being good neighbors, and reporting the things that they see. I think a lot of times, I may be wrong, but I hear from community that they don't want to kind of bother the police with this little thing that they saw, but sometimes it's can be very helpful. So encourage anybody watching to if you see something, say something, right? And I think too that while these numbers are encouraging, they're not a lot of solace to the victims of these crimes. They're not worried about statistics. They're concerned about their of course their safety and the safety of their property. And I think you mentioned in slide 17, but continuing to find innovative ways to deter both violent and property crime is very important. And of course taking some of the pressure off of our hardworking police officers. The property crime especially, but we have our work cut out for us in the next year. and beyond. So hopefully the trend of violent crime continues to go down, but we need to figure out how to reverse the property crime. And then I have just a couple of questions. I'm sorry, I think it was slide 15. You mentioned improved place-based conditions. Can you talk a little bit about that? That's one of the goals.
Yeah, so if you have abandoned houses, you have a lot of code violations in a neighborhood, you have those conditions that draw people to that neighborhood to commit crime, drug dealing, whatever it may be, that is a place-based condition that will affect the quality of life in a neighborhood and affect the amount of crime that goes on there.
That's something I actually do hear a lot. We get folks calling from neighborhoods saying that they see an abandoned house, they see activity in an abandoned house. And so they do call code, sometimes they call police. Can you give kind of a suggestion for how that should be if a neighbor sees some activity in, say, an abandoned house, what they should do?
And it could be, I mean, it could be a 311 call. It could be a non-emergency call. But, you know, I liken this back to the broken windows theory, where if you have an abandoned car on the street and, you know, a couple of days later you see the tires gone, next couple of days later you see the doors gone. So it draws it draws a bad crowd to the neighborhood that are probably, you know, going to do nothing there but commit crime, whatever it may be.
Councilwoman, if I may, to add to what the chief mentioned, and to let the community know that it's very important that they call, as the chief said, the non-emergency number at the police department or 311, because one of the efforts that we included in this year's budget is more analysis of data. And the analysis of the data across city departments, from code, animal care services, the police department, so we can have interventions that address perhaps not necessarily crime that is being committed, but quality of life issues.
That's a good point. Thank you, Marianne. Actually, I have a question about a technology and data analysis and how all of that is kind of gathered. Can you speak to that, Chief?
Sure. We years ago, we discussed the need to have an analytical team to give us more information other than crime is up this year versus last year, or vice versa. Now we have a lot more information on motives, times of day, days of week, that sort of thing. So there's a lot more down in the weeds information that we get now than we were getting before we had this analytical group.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about, going back to the community, just how maybe residents can access crime data if they're interested in looking at it? Do we have our famous or infamous dashboard for the community to see?
There's a variety of types of information on our website that anyone can get that information. And just let me say this, that so folks who want to report it will understand how it works. So it's very, very important that we get back to people who complain about something, have a complaint about something, whether it's crime or condition on the block or whatever, and even allow them to assist or to make suggestions on how we can affect that issue that they're talking about. So, for example, when they call my office, it's usually to Joe Frank, and Joe Frank will get all their information. We will push that information, if it's narcotics related, to the proper unit. If it's a code related issue, we'll push it to code. But that information will get pushed to the appropriate place for resolution, and then we will always get back to the individual who called with what we did and what we found, and what actions we took to resolve the issue, if it was resolvable. But we'll always do that. Follow-up's probably the most important thing that we do when we receive a complaint, because if they're not getting a follow-up, all they're going to do is get angry with us.
Well, and going back to the, some of the community members that call us about, say, abandoned houses, that we'll get the call, we'll help them connect to you or to code. or both. And then we get a call a few weeks later sometimes that they haven't seen anything different. So, you're not necessarily going to see something, but of course, like you said, follow-up is very important to ensure folks that we're working on these issues for them. So I appreciate that. I have just one more comment. Respectfully, though, Chief, I challenge that the crimes against society are victimless. I mean, I think animal cruelty is, there's a victim there. I know it's not a human victim, but also the pornography or obscene material, if it involves a child, there's a child victim somewhere. So I understand that you're defining it probably in law enforcement terms, and I'm thinking, as a lay person, but I maybe question whether we should use that language in this, because there's some of these that I think people would say, drug narcotics, that there might be a victim. And I will say, too, in your defense, that maybe drug narcotics is not that what you're arresting for, it leads to another crime that then you would call a victim, a crime with a victim. But I think just the language is a little confusing to people that aren't maybe law enforcement.
Noted. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Any other questions? Councilwoman Alderete.
Thank you, Chair. And actually, I'm glad that you said that, because I thought the same thing. I was like, well, there are victims here. So, yeah, I think, and words matter. So I would echo those sentiments. I did have a couple of questions. On slide 5, so it shows our response time as for emergency calls, 6 minutes and 19 seconds. What is it like for other major cities? What is the response time? Like Austin's is forever, right? Just throwing that out there.
it's hard to compare to other cities and say, well, they're lesser or more than we are, so we should either improve or we're really lucky. It just depends on the staffing levels, on the amount of calls that they get, the other cities. But our response times, and I don't just say that because I'm here representing SAPD and you're asking me, but our response times are pretty darn good compared to other cities.
No, that's helpful to know. And the reason I'm asking is because there are those onesie, twosie cases from our neighborhoods where the response time is really long, and it could be a non-emergency. I know that there was one, I believe it was in Monticello, where they heard a gunshot, or they heard several gunshots, and, it was a long time until the police responded. So, I just wanted to be armed with the information of, hey, our response time is good. This is kind of an anomaly for whatever reason.
With the report or with the call that, we hear gunshots, if there's nobody down, nobody hit, the response time is not going to be as good as if it were. That's not necessarily, a code 3 call every time we hear gunshots. So.
Okay, no, that's helpful. On slide number 7, I see the rise in kidnapping. So what are some of the things that SAPD is doing to decrease the number of kidnappings?
Well, whenever there's a kidnapping, I mean, we're not, you've got to be careful about your surroundings. You've got to be aware of where you're going, what time you're going. It's important. And we don't like to hear that, but it's the world we live in. And you just have to be cognizant of those things when you're going out and about. A lot of kidnapping reports we get are family related. So it's a parent who's not authorized to take the child, takes the child, is reported as a kidnapping sometimes. But we talk about it when it typically happens. Kidnapping is not a topic of conversation at every community meeting we go to. But if there are incidents of it that have happened, it's something that we may talk about.
Okay. On slide 8, the unknown category, I saw that it went from 51 to 70. What are some of the types of crimes that kind of fall in unknown?
Well,
that bottom line.
It could be any of them. We just don't know what it is. It could be any of those listed up there. We just don't have any facts that would point to any of those particular motives.
Okay, so it could be any of these.
We just don't have any information that would point to one of those motives.
Chief, can you give an example?
And I hate to be graphic, but if we find a dead body laying on the side of the road, we have no idea what what the motive may have been. It could have been narcotics, it could have been gang-related.
Thank you.
So,
Okay, no, that's helpful. Thank you. One of the things, and this might be for you, Maria, that we asked in the public safety meeting a couple of months ago after when we were looking at this was a map. Could we see like a map of where these crimes are happening? And can that be public information?
Yes,
Okay.
and I wanted to allude a little bit to the question of Councilwoman Caballo Havda. The police department has been working on a dashboard to report some of the information that they handle on a daily basis, calls, response times, crimes, et cetera. We anticipate that we're going to be done probably, we could present it to this committee either next month or the month after, but they're pretty close. And to your point, that will show on a map where these calls are coming from, as well as where this crime data, where it's coming from as well. And we have some of that information on our website already, but this will make it a little much user-friendly to
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to that. So, because, we do, not only from our council office, would it be helpful to understand where this stuff is happening, but, we do have a lot of concerned residents who also want to stay vigilant in their areas and stuff. And so I think that if we can provide them with that information as well, that's helpful. It's helpful for all of us in terms of transparency. Let me see. I did have another quick question. On slide 9, it shows that the, for animal cruelty, that number stayed consistent. How does SAPD work with ACS to address issues of animal cruelty?
if they, when there's an animal cruelty event that they respond to, if SAPD assistance is needed to file that case or do some further investigative work that they may not be comfortable doing, we will assist them with that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering where, I can't remember, I don't know if we talked about it in a public safety meeting or something, but I remember we talked about, if someone's hurting an animal, they're likely hurting people. So I'm wondering how we're tracking who those people are who are hurting animals to make sure that they're not going to continue the hurt towards an older person or towards kids. So I wonder who in the city would kind of take the lead on tracking those people.
So it's a combination of both, the police department and ACS. So if ACS reports that there's a case of animal cruelty, they will work with the police department to make sure they have perhaps information they need. Sometimes that would lead to an arrest. And then based on that information, as they work the case, they may be identifying other issues in that household. One of the things that we are doing more proactively is with a Good Neighbor program, as we are addressing some of those addresses that have many calls, 311s and 911s, as the ACS officer goes into the house, or it could be somebody from the police department, if they see other signs within that household, those are being reported to SAPD. Could be, for instance, potential elder abuse, or it could be potential child abuse. And then the police department will take the lead on those. So the reporting could come from ACS or from SAPD.
And then the Good Neighbor program or whatever is kind of keeping a track of, hey, this house, has a couple of call-ins, and so kind of being proactive then with the
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
investigative work then. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Thank you, Maria. Also, one issue that we hear a lot of is from neighbors is mail theft and the cluster mailboxes. I know that is frustrating for you all because you all can't do anything, or that I know of, it's frustrating for us. I'm wondering what we could do as a city to, I think it's at the Congress level that our congressmen have to do something about that, right? Or
I'm looking at Liz or the chief to.
Yeah.
The
to change the
penalty
law.
for mail theft is not enough to deter anybody from doing it. And what I typically recommend is somehow or another fortifying the area around the the cluster boxes with more lights, more secure boxes. My understanding is that the locks are owned by the federal government, but the housing around it is something that the neighborhood could alter to make it more secure. But it's basically the locks that are getting broken into. So it's been an issue since the time I was back in D.C., and that's 50 years ago.
Yeah, I know. It's always so frustrating. I feel horrible for these neighborhood associations. I mean, one, all the residents' mail is stolen. Two, in order to get another mailbox, is like, you know, some of them have quoted us up to 10 grand, which wipes out a whole neighborhood association's funds. And so I mentioned this before, but it's kind of like that Spider-Man meme where like they're all pointing towards each other and no one's doing anything. So we're just trying to figure out how do we help our neighborhoods with this. You know, we're not finding a good answer.
We'll follow up to your question, Councilwoman, to see what changes could be made potentially that we can perhaps advocate through our IGR committee.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. One other quick question. On slide 13, I see that y'all recovered 51 weapons. How many weapons are reported stolen a year?
You know, I had that number in my head some time ago, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but I will get it for you, and I will tell you that it's a lot.
Yeah. And that's what I was thinking, too, because when you were talking about all the cars getting stolen and then they're used to commit other crimes, what was going through my mind is how many guns are kind of circulating in that process.
We're thinking it's 2,400.
2,400 guns.
Yeah, that's a lot of guns.
That is a lot of guns. Okay, thank you. I'm still processing that. And then finally on slide 16, the problem-oriented place-based policing. I mean, it sounds great for all of us to work together and for that data to come together and work for us so we could be proactive. I was curious, who's going to be the lead on that? Is that this city department saying, hey, here's the analysis, let's be proactive on this? Or
Yes, so we've already started the work under that initiative, working with UTSA. Our departments went through a training, and those departments include the police department, Metro Health, Parks and Recreation, Public Works, Human Services, Neighborhood and Housing Services, Planning, the City Attorney's Office. So we created this internal task force. And then through the data analysis that UTSA has been doing for us, they identified of the hotspot policing phase of the crime prevention plan, those hotspots that we have treated several times and we haven't been successful in reducing crime. So those are the areas that they identified, and right now we're focusing on one of them. All these departments are coming up with strategies to be able to deter crime, something that we're going to be happy to come back to this committee and present on the results. So that's how it's being done. So we're on the first steps of that plan, and starting with one location. Eventually, we will expand it to other locations in the city.
Awesome. I'm excited to see that and to see, you know, again, how we can collect all these data points, whether a code compliance request from 311, Animal Care Services, you know, and also the eyes and ears of the police and what they see, and then be more proactive on that. So I'm excited about that. And I don't think I tell y'all enough, but thank you for all y'all do. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I just want to make a brief comment about the mailbox clusters. I know Congressman Castro has written a letter to, I guess, the Postmaster General. It was in September, about there's a contention about who's responsible for them now, because now they're saying that the HOAs are responsible. So anyway, I think I'll provide you a copy of that letter, Maria, and then IGR. I guess we'll work on that. But it's become a big issue. Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Dr. Kaur.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief, and the team for all of your work. I have a few questions specifically about the data, but I just wanted to get a little bit more of an understanding of this report and how it fits in with any of the other data that we're looking at on an annual basis. So is this the kind of the only annual crime report that we look at as a department and as a city?
It's the only crime report that we send out to the federal government, with the FBI. And again, they will review the numbers. If they see any anomalies or something that they question, they'll get back with us. But these numbers are what's been reported to us right now from reports taken on the street and the information that we take out of the CAD. And that's what we send to the FBI. So
Understood. So this is what we're sending to the FBI for the specific reporting
Yes.
Mechanism. But what is our internal data analysis process look like? Do we get a more comprehensive report as a council that shows breakdowns into any of these categories or neighborhood breakdowns or other things that we might be looking at to make our strategic plan or our decisions for the next year?
we will, well, internally, we look at things that the investigative units will look at all the information and dig down into it where they need to better try and work the case. As far as what the council gets, this is pretty much it periodically throughout the year.
And I would add to what the chief mentioned, internally, there are many reports that the police department looks at, and specifically on the work of the investigative units and how we're progressing in resolving those cases. Additionally, if there's a request from a council member on any specific crime data, the police department will provide that. What we are building on this other dashboard is much more comprehensive that you see here. For instance, response times by substation, also the work of the investigative units as well that is not reported in here, as well as the calls that is also, we've done quite a bit of analysis on that in the past. So it's going to be more comprehensive than this annual report that we provide. Well, actually, we provide it to the council on a quarterly basis.
So, like, for example, one of the ones I was thinking of on one of the last slides, you talk about the 4 areas that you're going to be working on with the youth violence, gun violence, sexual violence, and domestic violence, but I don't see actual data related to that. Like, I don't see a breakdown of, I see the homicide breakdown, and there's a couple of things here that could be correlated to those buckets, but I don't see what are the age groups for that, what are the areas, how do we know what different categories are defined under those. So I was kind of curious to see if we're going to create a plan with Metro Health, we need to have a starting point, and it would be great to see like what the history of those specific categories looks like. So I think that would be a request if we could see those 4 at least categories and what the data looks like. And particularly for me, the other thing I was thinking of was by neighborhood or by community. I'm curious because like this, like even looking at this victim demographic data, is that something that the federal government requires for us to submit? Okay. So I'm curious as to like why we select that, right? Because if you look at this demographic data and then you look at the data for 2 slides later on the crime against property demographic data, I'm like, what are we trying to show with that specific information?
So one of the things that we've added, Councilwoman, to this reports as we get questions from the committee, and those have been questions in the past to provide more demographic data on victims of crime. For instance, if you visit our website on the Cite and Release program, based on the feedback that we got from the community as well from the City Council, we developed that specific dashboard to address those questions. So the information is there, and we're happy to add additional information that you think is relevant. We hope that this dashboard that we'll be presenting will capture some of that proactively, but we're definitely open to any other suggestions the committee may have.
I would just push us to think about what are the other things about demographics that we want to consider aside from race and gender, and just knowing that every time you put that on a slide, you're saying something, right? And so, is there other components or factors that it would be relevant for us to see, right? Is there graduation rate that we want to show, or something, other demographic factors that affect why crime occurs, so we can truly understand the picture versus like if you go 2 slides from now to see, you know, that the victims just of race of victims. Okay, that's my point there. The other question that I had is, so on this slide, the family, intimate, partner-related homicides, do we know why we've seen almost double in that specific area?
Do we know why what?
Have we looked into the family, intimate, partner-related increase in homicide rate? Number 3 on this.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by have we looked into it.
Like, do we take this data do we go and try to figure out, okay, we see specific line item, this is increased. Why is that?
Well, when we go to a family violence-related homicide, for example, murder, we will look at the history of that individual who committed that murder or murder-suicide. We'll look at the call history. A lot of times there is call history where we've been there a number of times, other times there's not. I don't know that I could tell you why there's an increase. All that stuff kind of goes on behind closed doors, and I just don't know if we could tell you why there's an increase.
So what do we take? Do we take these numbers and do any analysis with them? Like, I'm trying to figure out, like, yes, the statistics are statistics, right? They depend on whether people are calling in or not. To the point of, because we could make a statement that crimes against persons has gone down, or we could say that people haven't been calling in enough, right? So I guess I'm trying to figure out. These are a lot of numbers on these slides, but what do we do with it? What's the story that we are trying to look at or understand based on these numbers?
Well, I think that these numbers in this category you're talking about, the city-county task force on domestic violence, pays close attention to these numbers, and they continue are looking for things to affect upstream to prevent these things from happening. And then also, I think we just wrung out all the things that we can do to provide victim relief from family violence events. But beyond that, I don't know what else there is to do with these numbers.
And Councilman, if I may, just taking outside the homicide factors, if we go and look at the work that we're doing with UTSA, we looked at the violent crime data. To your point, if you look at all these different types of offenses, we looked specifically at what is considered violent crime, and we did an analysis where it's happening across the city, and that's how we developed the 3 approaches to violent crime. We started with the hotspot policing, and we identified those areas where we have a highest concentration of violent crime to begin deterring that behavior. Number 2, as we are treating those spots and we're seeing that the increased visibility of police is not deterring that violent crime, that's where we're going with phase 2 on the place-based policing, that we are targeting what are the causes of crime for that particular area. Could it be that, as Chief mentioned, we may need more lighting? They may not be, depending on the structure of that particular facility, what are those factors that are contributing to the opportunity to commit crime? And what can we do to improve those particular factors? So that's what we're doing with the data. And then on the 3rd phase of the violent prevention plan, we're going to be looking specifically at those individuals committing crime and doing a focused deterrence program. So we are constantly looking at that data on the violence prevention, on the violent crime. For property crime, they're doing the same thing, doing the analysis to see what type of interventions they can implement, as well as the areas of the city where we're seeing an increase on property crime. So there's a group within the police department that does the analytics, that is constantly looking at this data to be able to drive the strategies that they're implementing.
So what I heard you say is basically the UTSA team was the one that did a lot of the analysis on is looking at different areas, thinking about what happens, and then trying to make adjustments. Does that happen? Did that happen one time, or are they like? Is that something that's annual that we constantly are looking at? Or because when you partner with the university, they do research at one point that's stagnant, and they don't necessarily repeat that.
Yeah, so we started the work with UTSA in 2021, and they have been doing it since. So at the beginning, no, I'm sorry, I think it was 2022.
Yeah.
And in January 2023, we launched the hotspot policing strategy. So we'll continue to work with them, and we will continue to work with them for the years to come. So this is a constant analysis that they're doing, and I'm looking at the chief or Bobby. Every 60 days, we're doing the analysis of the violent crime data.
So we're looking at the violent crime data, right? So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is what does the team that's with SAPD responsible for analytics, what do they do on, what is what they're looking at? What is the data points that they're examining, and what are the recommendations that they're making based on their analysis, right? So anytime we look at, are they digging into those 25 cases and trying to understand, okay, this is what we've seen, this is a trend that we noticed, can we make this improvement? So that's kind of what I'm trying to understand, is what is that team with SAPD responsible for?
They're looking at time, date, place where these things are occurring, the motives behind it, and what their analytics do. It gives us a map, I guess, to where the calls are coming from, what's happening there, and when they're happening, and we adjust our patrol strategies to that. So that's basically what that data is for.
So it's more about reaction versus proactive. It's trying to set up the SAPD's response time to be stronger versus thinking about why some of these crimes are happening and adjusting what we're doing to prevent them.
Sure, and I guess to address that question, Councilwoman, we added and we recently filled the position as a public safety outcomes coordinator that is looking not only what's happening, to your point, in the police department, which is more of a reactive process. A crime has been committed and it needs to be addressed. But also this position will be working with Metro Health primarily and other city departments to look at what are the drivers of crime and what things can we do in human services, what we can do in neighborhood and housing services and code enforcement that will augment the work of the police department to try to address what is creating crime in those areas. So that is the work that we started with UTSA in terms of analysis of data, also with the Good Neighbor program, and now with this position that we have filled, that'll be a proactive work with all the data we have, not only inside the police department, but also with 311's Animal Care Services Code, to have a more holistic approach. We also partner with UTSA to look at the many programs that we offer in the city and see if there's evidence-based data that points out that those particular programs contribute to the reduction of crime. So happy to bring that to the committee to show some of the work that we started to do, and now that that position is filled, that we'll continue to do.
I love that, and I love that we're thinking of all of these things outside of the department. What I keep coming back to is if we want our overall policing strategy to be more comprehensive, why are we partnering and keeping all of these positions outside versus enhancing the capacity of the department in this area? So just thinking from like a long-term conversation perspective, if some of these strategies are working, why not? Because partnering all of these positions, we're paying for it somehow, right? So why not think more about strengthening SAPD's capacity to be more proactive versus keeping all of the proactive data analysis response strategies external that are then partnering to feed it to SAPD? Does that kind of make sense about what I'm saying? If we want our community to truly believe and partner with SAPD as a responsive, proactive entity, we need to help make sure that they have that capacity internally, so they're not relying on external folks to do the analysis of why do we see this and then change practices. That is my only comment. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Dr. Kaur. I have just one more comment. When we were speaking about place-based crime and then the broken window theory, are we, as a city or police department, working with school districts for their shuttered schools?
We work with ISD police when there's an issue that would require us to work with them, but we don't get involved very much with ISD.
I wonder if there's an opportunity there to just sit and meet with them about their closed schools, just because they could be opportunities for maybe criminal activity as we move forward.
I speak with some of the chiefs on excuse me, on an occasional basis. But I can't say I do it regularly.
Okay. Maybe we can bring them here.
Sure.
Think about it. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the second item. Well, go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
Oh. Morning, Chair.
Good morning,
Public
sir.
Safety Committee members. My name is Robert Blanton, Assistant Chief at the Police Department, and I'll be partnering with our Chief Technology Officer I'll start this presentation out and Craig will conclude it. So this briefing is on our electronic citation technology. Can you hear me okay? I feel like I'm... So overview on the briefing here, we're going to talk about our current devices that we use to issue electronic citations. We're going to brief on some new e-citation technology that we're going to evaluate, and then the potential expansion of the utilization of those e-citation technology to patrol. So the background for our use of e-citation, in 2013, our traffic section, which is those officers that work do speed radar primarily up on the highways and whatnot, and they're kind of our biggest enforcement tool for traffic citations, began using the citation devices. These devices reduce the time that it takes to issue a traffic citation to a violator and instantly transfers that data to municipal court. The devices we're currently using are at end of life, and so we need to invest in some new equipment there. And the department has partnered with ITSD to conduct an evaluation and testing to replace those units that were currently in utilization in our traffic section. And we expect that expense to be $373,000 to make that upgrade. So our current use of technology, the department issued just under 100,000 citations in calendar year 2023. About 65% of those were done by our traffic section, and the other 35% by patrol and other folks within the department. Those citations include things such as speeding, no license, no insurance, and equipment violations like expired registration sticker, et cetera. And also CCDO is using this technology to issue parking tickets. And in 2023, just a little over 58,000 parking citations were issued by CCDO. And those include parking in unauthorized zone or failure expired parking meter to pay for the parking. So our current system, as I mentioned, the efficiencies, it's less time to issue that citation. And that efficiency is not just sort of the full-time equivalent efficiency of the time. I saw Chief Monastir here as well, but both departments, us and fire, can tell you that when you're up on the highways or out in the roadway doing stuff with cars whizzing by you, especially at highway speeds, it's a real danger for the officer or the fireman out there doing that job. So getting those folks, getting that citation done quickly and getting them back in their car and out of that risky environment is critical for us. Also, the instant transfer and integration to municipal court. And then those last 3 bullets there are really about sort of improved hygiene that comes with the electronic system. You don't have the sort of the post citation sort of mail delivery to municipal court, better tracking and monitoring, and then less data entry errors or the legibility of the officer's handwriting. And with that, turn it over to my friend Craig.
Thanks, Chief. Good morning, everyone. So I'll talk a little bit about the technology and what we're testing through right now. PD came to us early last year and asked us to start to evaluate the devices that they were using. I want to be clear, there's 3 components of the device. The device itself that is used to scan and actually put in the notes of the violation and actually collect the signature. There's the software that's on the device that we use today called Tyler that integrates with our municipal court software. And then there's the printer that actually generates a paper copy of the violation as well that can be given to the driver. So we talk about the e-citation, there's actually the 3 components. And then we have to upload the data. And then that is done traditionally today through a batch process at the end of the shift where you put the device in a cradle and you upload it. We want to do that real time in the vehicle in the future as we go forward. So we went through that evaluation looking for, should we be looking at other equipment? Should we even use an iPhone version of this instead of a device? We went through that testing as well with PD in June and July. And then we came back to a selection of the Zebra e-citation device, which is an upgrade of the device we have today, an upgrade of the software we have today, but a new printer that we're going to put in. I believe the original printer was called a Brother printer. We're going to a Zebra compatible printer as well. So that evaluation was done, and we pushed that out to our vendor community and asked for bids and updates on that solution. And we are currently working with one vendor right now, negotiating terms of that contract, and we anticipate bringing that solution to council in March for final contract. This is primarily focused on traffic, and so we also have the conversation about what do we do with patrol as we go forward as well. We are in that evaluation right now, having that conversation about do we take the exact same solution that were built for traffic and move it to patrol. I think the latest number is about 550 vehicles that would need to be filled in patrol. We have 110 in traffic, so 5 times the size basically as we go forward, but having the same technology available. Today, patrol is basically a paper-based when they have to do a citation, so this would give him the same technology as traffic has electronically to go forward. But we're also looking at 2 other options that might be different for patrol. Again, I don't know which one is the right one at this moment. We need to go through it. Is it better for patrol to use a cell phone-based option instead of the Zebra device because they do so many less violations? Well, we will evaluate that. It has its own pros and cons. How do you scan the driver's license? How do you upload it? How do you connect back as well? Or can they use the laptops they already have in their vehicles, which makes common sense as well. They already have a big device. But again, how do you scan the driver's license? How do you put it to a printer for a paper copy? Those types of things still need to be evaluated. So we're going to do the pros and cons of that as we work forward. And we expect that to be done in July and be able to come back with a proposal to the full rollout for the rest of the technology. There's one thing that's still in open discussion, this as well. The signature is captured on the e-citation device when you actually bring it to the vehicle and it's captured. But today, we still print a paper copy and leave it with the driver. So there'll always be the need for the printer in a vehicle, which gets expensive when you have to do lots of vehicles. We are having a conversation about, is the paper copy required? But again, I don't have any, that's a conversation we need to have with PD and others about the best process to do that. But could we make that paper copy an electronic copy in some way as we go forward? Again, it has its own pros and cons. So we will work that out in the evaluation due by July. So that concludes our presentation, and Chief and I are here for questions if you have any.
Thank you, Craig, and thanks, Chief Blanton. I have a couple of questions. First is data security and privacy. How is the security and privacy of data collected?
So these are all under the same CGIS container that the vehicle, the laptop, everything follows the same protocols. What we have to just want to be sensitive about is once the device is outside the vehicle, right, then we need to understand how they're going to connect to each other. But when they're in the vehicle and connected to the laptop, we have that security, yes.
Or even the device itself getting, I don't know, taken. I think it's very unlikely, but,
Right.
If an officer is there with it and somehow gets,
We would have the
Taken.
same protocol if the laptop was lost or taken. We can wipe a device instantaneously, yes, yes.
okay, got it. And how has the e-citation technology been integrated into your existing workflow? I mean, is it, maybe it's a question for a chief, but has it been seamless with what you already do? Has there been disruption? Was it difficult to implement?
No, in my conversations with the traffic section folks, they're pretty pleased with it. It works well. I think we always need to have some sort of backup because technology's not 100%, so we need to be prepared for some sort of failure or disruption in that. But if I'm answering your question correctly, it's well received.
Thank you. And does it work with other law enforcement technologies, outside agencies, if necessary?
No, I mean, we obviously can share data with those folks, so, on who the violators are, if there's that request, but there's no transmittal or sort of proactive.
Okay, just internal, right? Like I think you said to Muni Court, it goes to.
Correct.
Okay, yeah. And does it save the city any money in the long run?
Whew.
I mean,
Man,
I know
that's
there
a
was a
hard
big
question
price
for the
tag on it,
cops.
but.
Well, if I may, Bobby,
Please,
we
ma'am.
we can go back to the business case that we made when we implemented e-citation. It's definitely more efficient. It saves officer time, and it also saves the time that municipal court had to enter it. So I would have to go back, Councilwoman, but we did make a business case when we got the technology, because it definitely saves a lot of time, both to the officer and to municipal court.
Okay, thank you. If you don't mind, just to the committee, I think, sending the business case. Has there been good response from the police officers? Do they like, I mean, I think you mentioned traffic, but
Yes.
overall, are they,
Yes, they've been using it, for, I don't know, 10 years now or whatever it is, and it's definitely it's liked. I mean, it's more efficient.
well, I guess I meant more like the new system. Has there been some kind of like test run?
I apologize. I don't
should've
know
been more
exactly what that group that tested, what the
Okay.
feedback was, but I'm sure there's been some improvements.
So the upgrade, both the device, the printer, and the software was done in a controlled environment with the chief technology team and some traffic folks. So not a widespread group, but a small group in there. That has gone through the evaluation. And as we go through a rollout process, we'll work with the team on bringing them in and a training and seeing if we have other improvements to make.
Okay, I mean, I think this is really exciting. We want to be as efficient as possible, of course, and safe for our community and our officers. I think it's innovative. We want to move forward as technology progresses. My only, well, I guess I will give some input. You mentioned the paper, for what it's worth. I think you do probably have to do the paper because not everybody is going to have access to the internet or, once they've received their ticket, they might not be able to go online and look at their ticket. Just maybe be aware of that. I mean, I would like to not use paper. I mean, we want to, be as, conserve as much as we can, but I think it might be for a while necessary. Or maybe there's an option. Do you need it printed? Is that even a thing? Can you give them the person receiving the citation, can you give them the option for, here's the website or here's a printed ticket?
So we're going to try a couple of prototypes
Okay.
internally as we go through the evaluation, and we'll see. But we know that you can push a barcode to somebody, and then they can go and get the ticket themselves. We can send it to an email address. Not everybody has an email. There's all
Yeah.
kinds of pros and cons
Yeah.
of those. But in our evaluation, we'd like to set up some scenarios
Yeah.
and walk through. I think ultimately, you'll have to make a decision what's the most efficient thing for
Yeah.
all officers and all residents as you go through that
Yeah,
conversation.
I imagine it would have to be some kind of hybrid because some people need the paper copy, but probably most people don't.
Right, but the problem is if somebody needs a paper copy, then every vehicle needs a
Has
printer.
to have the
And
printer,
so then
that's
you gotta
true.
be prepared to do that even if it's
That's a good point.
occasionally, so we have to think through that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I guess I was thinking about the actual paper, but the printer itself, right? Okay, all righty. Those are all my questions. Any questions from you guys? Yeah, Councilwoman Aldana Capito.
Thank you, Chair. I have two quick questions. First off, thank you for this presentation. They're not necessarily related to the technology. It all makes sense, and I think it's probably a good thing, makes us run more efficient. But my questions are really around traffic citations in general. The first one is, I mean, because I know that, it's saying that we did 65,249 traffic citations, and speeding is just such a huge problem that we're all hearing about from all of our neighborhoods. So my first question was, why wasn't traffic citations and speeding in the first presentation? I mean, is it considered crime or?
I mean, yes, it's a Class C misdemeanor. You can't be jailed for it, but it certainly doesn't rise to the significance of the crime that we report to the feds at FBI.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was more of like one of those, classes offense are in two groups, A or B, and this is more B, and it's not as serious as the Group A offenses, but it's a persistent problem. It's probably the biggest crime problem that we hear about as council members is constant speeding. And so I'm just wondering how we could maybe rework this to have more of a focus on speeding, because when I'm talking to my council colleagues, all of us are just getting hounded with the number of speeding requests that neighbors are seeing happen in their neighborhoods. And it's upsetting to them, right? Because it's passing by playgrounds, it's their kids, it feels a little bit more intimate to them.
Yeah, and I was just asking the chair of the committee, I think there were some questions about traffic enforcement in another committee, and that we'll be happy to come back and do a presentation to this committee and just dive down into our traffic division. The number of citations issued by traffic, the 65,249, that is only traffic, but the entire department issued close to 100,000. So we can look into all traffic enforcement independently if it's done by the traffic division or patrol, and get more into the weeds if the committee is interested.
Yeah, definitely.
If I could add to that, and thank you all for your support on this, but if you remember back to budget, we added 100 positions, and we were having that conversation about officer time.
Right.
And one component of that, significant component, is that proactive time, where they can do something other than respond to calls. And so as we plus up and as we add those officers and create more of that capacity to be proactive, they'll have more opportunity to do things like traffic enforcement and those things other than just responding to calls on the patrol side of it.
And I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think that was the correlation when I'm mentioning at our neighborhood association meetings, the additional new police officers, and they're always mentioning about speeding being a problem. I think they're thinking, okay, finally, somebody's going to be addressing the speeding issues, which is, again, just front and center for our residents, and so however we could place more of a focus on it, I think that would be helpful. The second one is, and I'm not sure if this is more for municipal courts committee, but it'd be interesting to track, the number of citations that you all have versus how many people are actually getting charged. And I say that just because we all know, if you get away with low-level crime, you're going to do other things too. So I'd be curious to see, the number of speeding tickets and how many people are paying the full price of it, how many people are getting away with it, because, and I've mentioned here before, none of us speed through Alamo Heights and Castle Hills because we know we're going to get that $500 or $700 ticket and we're going to be forced to pay it. And I get nervous that part of the reason why we see so much speeding in all of our neighborhoods is because people know that they can get away with it and not pay it or get out of the ticket some way, somehow. And so, sure, those suburban cities obviously have different police units, you know, I mean, they don't have to spread their police force so thin. But, you know, however we can make those traffic tickets hurt so that we're setting the culture of you can't speed on our streets. You can't speed through our neighborhood streets or our bigger streets. And I was thinking about it earlier this week because I was driving up Northwest Military, and I mean, you go on Northwest Military from the highway and you just slow down because you know you can't get away with it there, like at all. And so I'm just trying to think of how we can set that culture and that precedent that if you're going to get a speeding ticket in San Antonio, you're going to pay for it, and it's going to hurt, and you can't wiggle your way out of it.
What I could offer, Councilwoman, when we come back and do the presentation on traffic enforcement, we can ask Judge Obledo to come join us and talk about the other, what municipal court does.
Perfect. Yeah, that would be helpful. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I think that's a great idea. I'd love to bring in Judge Obledo and have a presentation specifically on that. Also, I know that the court is pushing out text messages for individuals to resolve their citations. So I think, you know, COSTA is doing everything we can as in different departments to make it convenient for people to take care of their citations and efficiently to do that. So I appreciate the muni court's efforts in that regard. Councilwoman Dr. Kaur.
Just thinking about what Councilman Altagracia was saying, have we looked at like what could be an increase in, I hate to say this, but like revenue for the police department if we were to increase the number of traffic officers or the number of people working on citations to help supplement? Because, you know, obviously you remember the budget season. One of the pushbacks we're always getting is the increase in the budget for the police department. So could that help? Have we looked at the business case for that?
I think Fred and Dredge keep most of the money, but
Oh, okay.
I'll defer to Maria.
Well, all the funds come to the general fund.
Yeah.
Any citations. Sure answer to your question is no, Councilwoman, we have not
Might
looked
be
at it that way.
interesting to see, just like to look at the business case to see if, you know, if there are things that we need to support, because yes, we don't, we have to do so, making sure that the people that truly cannot pay and are not being, you know, unfairly penalized. But if we're trying to deter behavior in neighborhoods and also trying to figure out different ways to get sources for funding. Okay, the other question that I had was, there was two options that were looked at in terms of a replacement. What are the differences between the two options, and why did y'all select this one?
Primarily different vendors of the same kind of equipment, if you want to think of it that way. So the device in the field, the software, and the printer was the configuration, but what vendors could provide those?
And I saw like what our current technology does. What are the changes that we're getting with this new technology?
So there's the software technology itself has been upgraded through the years. The hardware itself has not. So a lot of it is in the hardware and in the printer, ease of use and those types of functions. Some of the software capabilities allow us to do real-time updates into the vehicle and directly to the court. We have to still work through the architecture of doing that, but we didn't have that option before. Everything was dropped in a cradle and uploaded, if you think.
And just piggybacking on what the chair said, I know you said you had like a focus group that included traffic officers to actually use and test the system, but was that, were they using it as if they were actually in the field? Was it more in a controlled environment?
I would probably, I don't know enough to answer that, but typically the chief's technology team is the one who organizes that inside of PD, and they work with various users to do that.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure that we're not like, we haven't, you know, user testing is the number one thing we talk about with technology, so that we've actually user tested it in the field to make sure it functions the way that we expect it to.
I think in this case, the risk is very low because of the transition of the work. If we were going to a new business process, we would increase that risk, absolutely.
Okay.
But maybe we have that conversation.
Yep.
We'll probably have that new business conversation more in depth on as we talk about expanding to patrol, because we may look at some different options that are out there for that.
And I know we talked about the option of going paperless. Is texting the ticket an option from the system?
Yes, system-wise, we can deploy the ticket to the driver in several electronic ways. The question is, are we comfortable with those ways? We need to test those out.
And what's the process going to look like to decide whether or not we go that way?
That's the chief's conversation.
Yeah, I think that's the evaluation we're going to have to do later this year, and it'll be even more involved than the one we went through last July.
And
with
then
the
will you
traffic
come
cone.
back and present which way you're,
Yes, we will be happy to do that, Councilwoman, before we take it to the full council. And what we do in that testing is that we have to think of the user. And specifically here in San Antonio, the composition of our community in terms of the availability of technology that they may have, and those individuals that may not have an iPhone, for example, or may not, for whatever reason, have any type of technology available to them, that we are taking into account of those groups. So that'll be part of the testing that we'll do before we recommend a solution. But happy to come back to this committee.
yeah, that's why I was thinking about the texting feature, because yes, while scanning a barcode, you'd have to have active data subscription, but what we know is the majority of people have the ability to text and receive SMS, so that was my thinking there, that if we try at least that piece, it would make it more efficient. Okay, that's it. Thank you, Chair. Thank you all.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman Dr. Kaur. Any other comments? All right, thank you guys for the presentation, appreciate you. And as promised, we were efficient and productive. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.